Good evening. I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. We do this every time we gather together because everything that we know comes from the land. You heard a beautiful song. That song came from the land. The song is an expression of the wind, which is connected to the land, the breath of the earth. I also want to acknowledge that every living being on this earth, and even the ones that seem dead, like the stones, are part of the land and are connected to the land. And we rely on all of them for one thing or another, from the humble little mosquito, the bacteria, and the birds and the animals and the trees and the grasses. We rely on everything to stay together, to live together, and to survive together for us to be here. We cannot overrun the planet because if we do, we will die. We cannot overrun animals because if we do, we will have little to eat. We cannot overrun the birds, the invisible beings. We cannot overrun things because we would be in danger I want to thank all the people that came before me for the land that we're standing on, because they are the caretakers. They're the ones who restored the earth to what it was when they first met it. And we must do that too. And so we honor the land, we honor the people before us, we honor the animals, the birds, the flying insects, we honor everything in the waters that came before us, that we might survive many, many more generations. Haijka Siem. I also want to read a poem to you called I'm Home Again. I know all of us are home these days because of COVID. My specific home is British Columbia, and I dream of it a lot, particularly now since we can't fly there. I'm home again. Blue-hued dark green islands jut up to reach the sky, still looking as though they're struggling to become flatlands, valleys, and lush green meadows. They didn't quite make it, most of them. They remain cedar and fir-decked mountain edges of earth tied to the deep. The sea holds these her baby lands, bathing them in her white-capped evening water, rocking them as though it were the ferry standing still and the islands moving. Memory pulls at my skin. Images punch holes in this moment of awe over the vista the not quite born islands make. My body knows these islands. The story of this corridor belongs to Suquamish boatmen, ferrying families from one end of its territory to the other. Cedar and ermine skin-clad women ancestors stand regal in the canoes while brown-skinned men dip and sing through the slated underbellied blue-green water. Conquest silenced these boatmen, stilling the story of canoes for a time to waken in the first year of my birth. This meander feels so familiar. I have to wonder whether or not I'm impressed. I'm home again. This journey from Squamish, BC, post-cultural prohibition in 1951 to Hedgebrook in the summer of 2000, 38 years after our emancipation, is fraught with urgent, watery aloneness. Only writers feel the aloneness of paddling about in our various sociological and historical swamps, weaving snippets of dream words we selected to play with onto the loom of our imagination. Harnessing language to plow new soil, create new story is thick, omnipresent. I'm home again. My pathway is strewn with sharp stones, singing confusing songs of yearning. My bones, my personal stones, sing back songs. Junnequid's yearning. I watch myself high-step my way to this language, this pen, this paper, this place. The stone's razored edges bleed white as the faces of my dead emerge, embossed by the shadows in the center of each stone. Between the stones holding their faces, ribbons of light flicker, snippets of busyness shine inside each ribbon. I watch myself steal moments to create art. Coolly and deliberately, I let go of she, grieve the parking of my original language and bury it inside my bones. I pick up the volumes of books cradling the text of this language. I feel the sandpapering this language once was and rewatch as my body smooths the rough edges as the words journey through me. Siya becomes Saskatoon. Sifilk becomes sea serpent. Junnequid becomes the mother of thought. Thought becomes hidden being. Hidden being becomes a spiral down to a moment of peace and recognition. Knowing becomes a spiral out to meet the world. This sea, this Junnequid, forms the structure of me. I'm home again. Killer whales sidle their litheness alongside the ferry. Cedar boughs acknowledge my return. Raven calls out a hello. Berries look ready to greet me. Even the sea peels back its tide to permit a trek across her mud just as I land. I can see the wetlands from the hill near my cottage, and the tears come. I'm home, Mama. Haijka for leading me here. Haijka, my dad, for fussing over language for me. Haiska to those who came before me for story, for song, for dance. You paved my journey home with light and alacrity. I'm home again. Suquamish voices are everywhere here. I'm so totally old and so completely new. I pull fragments from old file cabinets, splinters of memory, bind them to reshape my world. I reweave this imagined dream world onto old Suquamish blankets, history hole punched and worn to recraft today, to remember future in this new language. And I sing, I'm home again. Hachka. I'm done.
Oh, Lee, I forget how powerful your words are, especially when you read them. Walalan, Lee, from the bottom of my heart, that was absolutely, I have prickles on the back of my neck. Shalasi, bienvenue, welcome. To Louisi De-Ann Sheppard, Ediawe Gedakamgok. My name is De-Ann Sheppard, and I am from the land across the seas, now known as Newfoundland and Labrador. And I'm happy to welcome you to our event, the third episode in our series. And I'm still kind of shaken from Lee. Just a second, I'll pull myself together. Walalan to Jeremy Dutcher for allowing us permission to play his song. He's a Mi'kmaq brother and has a very unique rendition of the honor song, and very grateful that we were permitted to use that this evening. Walal and Terry for inviting me to this event, and it's our third, and I'm actually quite sad to know that it's our last. I'm not going to speak for very long tonight because we have such a lineup of fabulous folks for you to meet tonight, and I don't want to take any time from them. So quickly, I'm a proud ILNU nurse, and I've been had the privilege of working in nursing and as a nurse practitioner for the last 30 years, and I've wandered back into school and into a PhD at OISE and doing a collaborative in Indigenous health, and I now work here in Unama'ki, teaching at Cape Breton University. I'm a mom, a grandmother, an auntie, a partner, and all kinds of other wonderful things. And I'm going to just leave it at that. I think I'll pass it to you, Terry.
Hello and welcome, everyone. I too am still processing that poem. The loom of our imagination just struck me, and we're imagining new things tonight, so I'm really excited to be here. Before I begin and say anything about myself, I just wanted to say a couple of words about a dear friend and colleague from Cape Breton University, Margaret Deckman, who passed away this week unexpectedly. She was a brilliant scholar and a beautiful person, but most importantly, she tirelessly worked in our community on issues of poverty, mental health, and addictions. And she really modeled the compassion that many of us only dream of or aspire to. And she was supposed to be here tonight. So thank you, Margaret, for all that you gave to us, and we will miss you. So just to say, like De-Ann, I'll be brief. I'm a settler of Welsh and English descent, and I've lived in Unama'ki since 2004, very happily. I'm a mother of 2 boys with siblings and extended family in Panama, and I'm an educator and an activist. And as a settler, I've been particularly interested in how we can leverage our positions of privilege and power to challenge oppression in the here and now, how we can build links between the various communities and individuals that are seeking change. I've been inspired by liberation movements in Latin America and around the world, and I've worked in solidarity with many social movements for a lot of years. I think the organizers and participants in this series have been brought together, sharing a deep belief in the power of education to transform society, and the power of regular people to change the world for the better. And on behalf of the Global Social Justice Project and our co-sponsors, that's Unama'ki College, the School of Arts and Social Sciences at Cape Breton University, the Cape Breton Partnership, Planet Citizen, Peace Quest Cape Breton, and the Animal Ethics Project, it is really my pleasure and absolute honor to welcome all of you to this gathering. And we're especially grateful to our special guests and commentators, elders, knowledge keepers, educators, activists, scientists, and lawyers. We've got a real set of power people in the house tonight, folks. And I'm personally very grateful to my friend, colleague, and collaborator, De-Ann Sheppard, who kindly and willingly jumped on board to help me with this series before she knew what she was getting into. And she's brought a wealth of ideas, patience, and compassion throughout the process. And we're both strong believers in building relationships. And ours is one that I am learning so much from, and I am so grateful for. So why this series, The Politics of Hope, Building Resilient, Compassionate, and Inclusive Communities? A few of you have been to our previous sessions, but for those of you who are coming on board just for the first time tonight, the issues that we're looking at are not new. We all know that, but many of us are feeling this real sense of urgency to really confront ongoing colonialism and really what I and many others think is an obscene economic inequality that we see in our communities and around the world. And of course, all the other pieces that go with that, racism, sexism, homophobia. And we wanted to create a space for people to really be able to get together and talk about how they're feeling about this moment that we're in, but also the kinds of, the various ways in which they're trying to confront these systems and to kind of bring down the walls that are separating us, as Lee so eloquently put, from not only ourselves, but from other animals and from the earth itself. Our commentators, our speakers, our tech support, thank you Catalina and Jeremy, have been carefully chosen because of their community engagement and for their personal efforts to transform and heal our world, and to, importantly, to model more compassionate ways of being. And the idea for tonight's session, Reconciliation in Action, Stories of Friendship and Collaboration, was to bring together a group of Indigenous friends who have been working in collaboration with settlers for many years, and to find out, what does that look like in practice? What kinds of challenges have people faced, and what have been the moments of insight, maybe the humor, maybe the moments, and just to kind of have them share their stories. So we'll go to that shortly. Before we do, though, just a couple of housekeeping issues for those new to the system. If you use the Zoom gallery view so that you can see all the panelists at once, the chat box will appear on the side. If you would like to ask a question, use the question and answer tool. And we welcome all respectful and constructive comments on the chat. We apologize in advance if we don't get to address all your questions, but we really do value what you have to say. So please hold those thoughts for future sessions, and we'll also give you a chance at the end in the chat to ask any questions that you'd like us to follow up on and any comments on the session. So I'm going to begin by passing the floor to our first pair, Mi'kmaq elder and knowledge keeper Albert Marshall, and community educator Nadine Lefort, who currently serves as communication and outreach manager with Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources. Welcome. You're still muted there, Nadine.
I thought I would be unmuted. Hello, everyone. So nice to be here with all of you, and it's always a treat to be sitting next to Albert. We talked a little bit beforehand how we wanted to do this, we've done some webinars in different ways, like everyone has, and we really thought it would be important for a session on stories of friendship and collaboration for us to be sitting next to one another, sharing a cup of something hot, and also to be able to share our story in the same place. So my name, Terry mentioned, my name is Nadine Lefort. I'm of Acadian settler descent. I grew up in Wabanaki and traveled and worked and lived in many other places across the country and around the world. And I moved back to Wabanaki about 8 years ago, and I'm so happy to be back in this part of the world. And Albert and I have known each other for about 20 years. We started working together, collaborating when through the Institute of Integrative Science and Health, which was active then at Cape Breton University College of Cape Breton at that time. And Albert and Merdina, I got to know Albert and Merdina through that program. They were the kind of the guiding force behind the program. And at the time, they sort of took me under their wing, and I've been grateful for that ever since. And then Albert and I always shared stories, some stories that we couldn't, I don't know why, but we didn't really share with other people. And they led to interesting and exciting and very creative collaboration opportunities, some research opportunities and presentations, and then interesting little nuggets in the community that I think Albert will talk a little bit about. But mostly, I think we have learned from one another how to listen to people from very different backgrounds and with very different stories, and I think we still keep each other on our toes, and are always I think what we tend to do is come together with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, share some ideas about things that have been coming up in our personal lives, and then try to think of how we can make some changes in the community around us or in bigger pictures. Albert always has ideas on tackling huge initiatives, and sometimes with a very small step. And while I was thinking about, we've been talking for the past few weeks about what we wanted to talk about today and what has sort of guided our story of friendship, our story of collaboration. I was flipping through a journal. I mean, it was a work journal, and found a quote from Albert. And this was from 2008, and I was living in Victoria, BC at the time. And I found a quote, so I don't even know how Albert gave it to me. I mean, we spoke on the phone every now and then. Sometimes Merdina would call to ask for me to transcribe things, or I don't even remember the context of it. But this little post-it note that I found from 12 years ago that says, is a quote from Albert from January 8th, 2008. And there's a little asterisk that says, idealism, realism, from the ideal to reality. And the quote says, when I act from my heart, anything is possible. And I thought that was such a great quote is like a seed, this nugget that Albert has planted within me, and within that the story of our friendship and our ongoing collaboration on two-eyed seeing, and on bringing two-eyed seeing to our community really starts with that nugget, that gem, that it's always important for us to act from our heart. And I think that's a perfect time for me to hand it over to Albert.
Yes. My name is Albert Marshall, and I am from the Moose Clan, and I am from Mi'kmaq, but I happen to reside in the community called Eskasoni, and I am just a student of life. Since this concept of Edwaptimuk came to be known as Edwaptimuk, is that there was always an intent that it was obvious from our perspective that we will never be alone again. And with that, it was obvious that would it be much more effective if we can seek out not allies, champions, people that would have interest of training themselves as to how they can weave back and forth between our perspectives and their own perspectives of whatever the country that they may be from. Because it became obvious that we will never be able to practice like our ancestors were. First of all, the state of our environment, is as such anyway that even if we could, we couldn't, because our environment is no longer pristine. A lot of these species have been very much compromised. So it became apparent then that how do we navigate forward of keeping abreast of who I am as a Mi'kmaq person and what I have to rely and depend on from the other source of other ways of knowing. And that was and that is a quite challenging question, because we are very much comfortable of being able to express ourselves of who I am as a Mi'kmaq person. And I also am somewhat aware that we have been privileged somehow, or privileged or forced to adhere to the other people that are here, their customs, their traditions, their ways of knowing. And we often ask, how expedient could it be if we can somehow bring those two knowledges together? So then this term came up, co-learning. And right from day one, of course, we had other, Cheryl Bartlett, Richard Croker, the architect, and many other people, many more people. It became obvious that if we can work together with these champions, then I believe the message that we would be delivering collectively will resonate much more effectively, because the non-native people can see for themselves that this is not just an Aboriginal perspective, but also Eurocentric perspective. And you have a person from one background and the other from the other background, pretty much presenting the same concept. And that has been somewhat very, very effective for us for a long time. And I think this is the only way, I believe, that we should be very much mindful or cognizant that how wonderful would it be if somehow, if we can humble ourselves and open our hearts and minds and look at other perspectives from other cultures like the Mi'kmaq. Because for some reason, our ways of knowing, our ways of being have been very much oppressed, discouraged. And the question is always, we were asking is why? Why is it? Why is our ways of life doesn't seem to have a fit into this Eurocentric system? Yet, we do pride ourselves that we have managed to coexist with this natural world for many, many thousands and thousands of years without ever compromising the ecological integrity of the area. And not only we have somehow managed to coexist with the environment in a balanced and harmonious way, but we also managed to coexist with other tribes that are within the close proximity of where we are. So peace and harmony, or friendship, has been, to me, in my humble opinion, has been an overarching objective. Because if you really think about it, by working collectively of ensuring that every member of those groups are going to be healthy and well. Because it's not too far back in our minds, no matter what age we may find yourself in, any of us can become incapacitated at any given time. And if a person becomes incapacitated, well, the biggest concern that person will have then is, who's going to look after me, my family, or so on. But if you are part and parcel of this collective group, then you have no problem. All you have to do is use all that energy you have to ward off the invasion that your body's been subject to. All your physical beings and all your other needs will be met by the community itself, because they do feel they have a vested interest too, because if everyone is healthy and well within the community, then the community is very much prepared to meet any challenges that may come upon that community at any given time. And the more healthy people that you have in your group, you'll have a better chance then of meeting those challenges. Because our teachings, our beliefs have been so heavily ingrained on maintaining this collective consciousness, collective effort, because of our so vulnerability of life. So I think that I think could also resonate in not only in a relationship, but anything that we agree on to tackle, in which if we have other perspectives or multi-perspectives, then I believe the challenges then could be lessened, because we'll be moving forward together with these multiple perspectives.
We need to pass it along.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, you haven't gone over time. I'm sure we could all listen to Albert talk on this for a long time. We do want to keep the time slots, and we want to hand it over to Duma and Matthias. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Albert. Hello, Nadine. Hello, Msidwen Kwe, Msidwen Dasi Mugin to tell. I guess I'm going to start it off, Matthias, and I'll pass it over to you after I'm done quickly. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dumas Young. I was born into the rabbit squirrel clan for the rabbit clan. I consider my home community to be Maligwej. My band is Eskizoni, but I'm like the Joker in the deck of cards. I fit in everywhere in Mi'kmaq. So with that, I'm going to talk about our particular project. Between Matthias and I, we work on a project we call Musqueyomi. And it's really about allyship and how to develop a relationship with each other and with a community, with various components of the community, and everything associated with community. So just to give you a little quick background, about 20 years ago, Chief Terry Paul of Member 2 asked me to help Member 2 and regain knowledge about Inuit Pisun, Mi'kmaq medicine. So yep, and that's what I did. So I said to him at the time, we're not quite ready. And then about a couple of years ago, I said, we're ready. So how me and Mateus got together was, I think he came on to a medicine walk that I was doing, and we took a bus out and we were taking people. I was teaching people how to look for medicines and gather them and stuff. And I casually mentioned that we were going to go to Muligwedge and make some musquiomi for my mother, who uses it to treat people with skin conditions. And from there on, we had discussions, we had conversations and excitement, and we started building the idea of how we can collaborate and work together and working together. And I also indicated that we have to collaborate, work together with the community of Member 2 and the elders of Member 2. So that's because of my promise to Chief Terry Paul. So a couple points when we think about allyship. I like to think of it, you're basically going into a relationship. Now, some relationships are short-term, long-term. And so there is, basically we're looking at developing a relationship, and, and as you get to know each other and, get the trust is built up, and it may happen very quickly, may happen, slowly. And sometimes I made the point in our prep call here that sometimes when you're dealing with relationships with Indigenous communities, Indigenous folks, Indigenous groups, sometimes you have to assist in meeting some of the immediate needs so that the folks are able to come to the relationship with full and informed consent, and that's what often is needed, to meet some immediate needs and ask folks, what is it that you need? What is it that I want, and how I can help? And to take and listen and very carefully. And sometimes, and I like to say, we listen to the stories. And I like to tell the stories of, how we got together. And these stories are how we work with elders, and how we work with ethics groups and even Indigenous ethics. There's multiple layers associated with allyship. And I think about all this navigation stuff. And part of my role in the Musqueam Project is to help Mateus and others from outside of the community understand that it is not just one area that you interact, it's multiple areas, and these things are very fluid. And as one person once used to say, they're in a constant state of flux, and sometimes we'll be in a meeting with elders, we'll be talking about the project, and one of the elders says, well, enough of that, when are we going to go pick sweetgrass? So the attention goes there. That's very important. So, and we do that, and we know that's what's part of the relationship building. The other thing is in allyship and building these relationships, you need to have some sort of a foundational principles associated with that. And I always think about our treaties, the peace and friendship treaties, the covenant chain of treaties, what we call them, Uncle Gamkoe or Gizna Gizam Wemkoel. No, that's what we refer to them. These treaties tell us how we should establish our relationships. People say, well, these are peace and friendship treaties. Basically, we promise not to kill each other. They're more than that. They're very deep. They're very in-depth. They're about trade. They're about economics. They're about dispute resolution. They're about Indigenous law. They're about how our relationship is to move forward with elements of each, kind of trying to find what I like to term to be a middle ground in a way. So it's one of the wonderful things about this, and I know I'm going to switch it over to Mateus in a second here. It's we bring both of our strengths in here, both of our things, and we bore very heavily on Albert and Rodina's work that they have done, and the Eduoptimum or the two-eyed seeing approach. And that's how we often look at, and this is what we do. And sometimes it's been humorous, sometimes it's a little tense, but like our relationship, there's a lot of up and down, and just, but we're still going in the same way. And it's not a short-term thing, you know. It's like our relationship, we're in it for the long term. Okay. Now I'm going to pass it over to you, Mateus, and you can, offer some of your wisdom on your side. Okay,
well, thank you very much, Duma. So I'm Matthias Bierenstiel. I'm a chemistry professor at CBU. Oh, now it's switched off. I guess it's the internet connection. It's still there. We should have a little bit of discussion here. And I'm originally from Germany. I'm a settler in Canada. Now I'm also a Canadian citizen. I have a family, have kids, and live and work here in Cape Breton Island, Mi'kma'ki. Yeah, as Duma said, it was very serendipitous. We basically met at CBU. He took a few students out to a medicine walk, picking sweet grass, and then he talked about birch bark oil, musqueomin. And me being a chemist was simply curiosity. Oh, you have bark. And he talked about this oil and about the story from the early 1920s that it helped a breastfeeding mother who had a rash on her chest and couldn't nurse her kid. And because the ill-known midwife made this concoction, mother and baby survived. And so it was really curious, what is the chemical compound? So this is really from my career as a chemist and the scientist to look for that. And then we just helped out, like it's done traditionally in a campfire method. And you take, birch bark, you make the oil, and then you make the soap. And people were using that, and Duma was teaching that to other people, and I helped out with my skills, and then people were using the soap and come back and said, it's almost magic. It's like whatever you have, eczema, psoriasis, acne, it works. And so the curiosity came about. And what I like about our relationship, and what I would like to bring to this table here, is kind of this two-eyed seeing approach, that there are two viewpoints to this, and how much I actually have gained through this. And Duma always brings me down too. He says, like I said, like, oh, we found this. It says, well, the Mi'kmaq people already knew about that long ago, centuries ago. Particularly in this oil here, we found it has antibiotic properties, and so broad spectrum. And so the Mi'kmaq people use this topical ointment for centuries. And just a comparison, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin only in 1928. Which is normally recorded as, kind of the finding of antibiotics. And so this is really kind of a nice story about this, and how to go about. And what I learned, as a chemist here as well, is just listening to the stories. And by doing so, we were actually able to refine the oil and make it, a little bit more effective in terms of, producing it in a more controlled way. And that is really, really neat. And so it's like really this back and forth about how is this, how is that, what can we do, using the big machines that we have in the lab to analyze it, and then also to communicate with different cultures. And not just like, oh, let the scientists just take over, but really going back and forth. And it's a wonderful journey about this. Duma and I, we're currently holding the largest CIHR health research grant at CBU in order to investigate what is in there. And as Duma said, we set out from the beginning, it has to be balanced between Indigenous knowledge and the Western science knowledge. And that balance actually strengthens the whole proposal and the whole research. With only one side, it wouldn't be as strong. And in fact, now we're opening up a new chapter, and Duma might want to talk about that more, is actually, one thing is we want people to have this, And so it's about commercialization, like when can people buy this? And it's now about the ethical commercialization and how can we go about this? And there is nothing right now. We can't really follow anyone. We have to do it. And so it's kind of living this aspect of how can we be balanced with the traditional Mi'kmaq medicine for the benefit of all. And yeah, so Duma, if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, yeah, Matthias mentioned ethical commercialization, and that's what we are. In many of the discussions and the stories we've heard from the elders at Member 2, and there was always a hesitancy about commercializing traditional knowledge, traditional medicine, and everything. And people point out that yet our treaties, are based on trade and commerce. And then many folks said it's not really the commercialization that's the issue. It's really who benefits. In the past, communities never benefited, or that was stolen or anything like that. They said, and that's why, there was the hesitancy there. So, and we had lots of discussions, conversations, debates with elders and everything, and a back and forth conversation. And I'm like, what is it that we're looking for? What is that we need? And they said, we want to make sure that if we're going to, part of the principles is sharing. And by sometimes we kept the medicine secret, so secret that hardly anybody knew them, or that they were almost lost to time. And only 2 people knew about this, and one family. And if something had happened to that family, that this knowledge would have been lost for time. And saying by protecting it so harshly, and we didn't share it, we almost lost it. So part of the flip side of it is the elders in Member 2 were saying that we need to share in order to protect. And it's it may sound like a contradiction, but it's actually quite in following with Indigenous law and Indigenous legal principles. So that's where Member 2 First Nation is going to come in with their business expertise, and the principle is ethical commercialization. They're going to ensure that the Mi'kmaq people benefit, and that this is a win-win situation. And I noticed that we have 1 minute left, and I'm going to pass the floor to Isabel and to Steve. Well, taho.
All right, Ismael.
Yes, I can't get my camera going. Okay, there we go. Thank you to all the speakers who've gone before. You've got all kinds of thoughts and memories going in my mind. My name is Ismael Monroe, and I'm currently coordinating a project called Abajiwala Malutanej and Women of First Light, and have been involved in various Native struggles and projects and such since about 1978. One of them being around freedom of religion for First Nations, so that people could swear on a pipe in the courtroom, and that elders could go into the prisons and such. So I'm going to pass it to Steve to introduce himself, and then we'll start a conversation.
Thank you, Isabel, and good evening to everyone who's with us this evening. Excited to be here. My name's Steve Law, and I have ancestors from Scotland, and some who've come over to this territory in Turtle Island. I grew up in the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and now out here in Mi'kmaq. And Isabel and I have worked together for a while on various initiatives, working with communities and organizations and community-based groups and social movements, supporting folks around the larger questions around social justice work and social transformation and allyship. And Isabel has been involved in this for many years, and so in many ways is my teacher, and always the person I go to ask all sorts of things about what we should do and how we should do and how we should approach things. And so we're going to just have a little conversation back and forth around allyship and sort of our experiences around some of this work. And so I just wanted to, I'll start with asking Ish, tell us a story, share a story about allyship, so that people can hear a little bit about what it looks in practice.
Okay, so I'll also say I'm Gutjamanese, which is a Scottish woman. So my people came from the Highlands of Scotland. My mother's family came in like around 1680 to Mi'kma'ki. And my father's people came in 1778 from being cleared from the Highlands. So one of my first experiences, I was probably in my 20s, and I was living in Toronto at the time, and was asked if I would help with a gathering and a march in Toronto around some Indigenous issues that were happening. And at that time, one of the elders was Art Solomon that we were working with. And in this project, when the gathering was coming together, people were, had different things that they were needing to do. And some things fell through. And so, we jumped in and started filling things in. And when it was all over, Art Solomon came to me and he said, I've always thought of. And what he talked about was, don't run ahead if we're all walking. And so that was a really important lesson for me, and thinking about how I work with folks. And I think it is around that true, like Albert was talking about the collective, and I would use the word sort of collaboration, in which everyone in the circle is equal. No one is above somebody else. And also needing to do work on your own self. Like, I've made major mistakes in work that I've been doing. And I've been very lucky that people have told me, and I've owned those mistakes and learned from them. And I didn't go into a place of feeling guilty or feeling shame. It's all, we're just on this life journey. And so I think that's really important. And it's also important, if you can, to learn your own history and learn the impacts colonialization has had on you and on your people as well. So I've looked at, after having spent many years living and working with First Nations, looking at my own Gaelic culture and learning about the clearances of the Highlands, learning about my language, and learning in my language there is no word for ownership. You don't say my child because you don't own that child. And so these types of things help us unpack the way that we are with each other, so that we can have real, true collectiveness and collaboration. And I think that bringing Western science and the traditional way is so amazing, because it's true what Dumas says, that folks knew this for, thousands of years. Scientists now discovering that trees talk to each other, and yet traditional people always knew that. And so that's really quite magical. And I'm wondering, Steve, if you want to share the story of when we were in Fredericton and what happened there and how that felt for you.
Sure. So Isabel was talking about some of the things about collaboration and how do you work together, and that we're all in it together, and that there's no sort of person above another person. And as settlers and as a person who's been trained and given all kinds of responsibilities to think about how to work with others, and as a facilitator, which puts me in a position that has some kind of people will look towards you to provide some guidance at times. And Ishbel and I were doing this training, and so how does that operate? What does that look like when you're trying to figure out how to work with everyone, even though you may be trained or experienced or have this background and been very colonized in how we approach things? We were doing this training with some folks from the Mi'kmaq community and some folks who were settlers or newcomers. And we had spoke with folks about how to open some of the sessions, and an elder was coming around and starting the session of the morning with an eagle feather and doing a smudge with people, and the eagle feather fell, and I was sort of, in theory, I was like facilitating. I was the person who was kind of like on the stage, I guess, if you will, and so the person who dropped the eagle feather, sort of was an elder and was kind of taking a moment, and so my instinct, of course, would have been to go forward and be of assistance and help out, because thinking I can do something here, but having had a little bit of experience, I sort of realized I knew, another part of me knew, don't do anything. This isn't for you to do. This isn't your process. Even though you're quote unquote a facilitator, this isn't your process. This is a ceremony that has thousands of years of experience, and people here know what to do, and you don't need to. But I did look over at Ismael with this like deer in the headlights, like, oh my gosh, should I do something? Should I not do something? And Ish, of course, in her very lovely way, was very sort of non-committal in terms of her response. Maybe she nodded her head slightly. I'm not sure what she did, but it was an assurance to me that really I needed not to do anything, that the community would do it. The community knew how to take care of this moment. And I, as a settler, actually didn't know what to do. That wasn't my place. It wasn't my ceremony. It wasn't my place to take responsibility here. And so that's what the community did. Even though there was some, other elements that took place in that moment, the community itself knew what it needed to do. So that was an example, a really concrete example, I think, about how to step back as a settler, and how to think about how we work together in ways, even though we may have been trained in strong hierarchies and strong ways of doing things, that there are other ways, like through the two-eyed seeing approach, there are other ways of doing things that we should be aware of. And so that's one example. And I know, Ismael, you have other examples of moments in time or learnings that you've had around what would be helpful for settlers to know about allyship or being in solidarity or being friends. Give us another story from your perspective.
Well, I think the most important thing is about building relationships. And that is the most key thing. Before you have allyship, you have to have a relationship. And I think other speakers talked about that as well, and so people say, well, if I don't know anybody, I don't know how to have that friendship. And part of it can be simply, going to different events, going to the powwow and pick the landing, reaching out to people that way. Or if you're going to university, making folks feel welcome, because often there really isn't a feeling of being welcomed. And I think about one piece of work that I was involved in 21 years ago when the Marshall decision came down, and I was working with Coastal Communities Network. And at that time, actually, Albert Marshall came to one of the sessions that we had. We did a project called On Common Ground, that we were all on common ground. And we were working with fishermen, non-native fishermen. We were working with all kinds of different groups all around rural Nova Scotia. And when that came down, we said, we believe in the inherent right of all rural communities. And so that can't mean just white rural communities. It has to mean all rural communities. And so we did a project in 3 different prongs. And one of the prongs was bringing together people down in Digby County. And it was bringing together 2 people from the African Nova Scotian community, 2 people from Bear River, 2 people from Digby Neck, and 2 people from the Acadian communities. And the distance between the communities were so long that it probably took at least 2 months to get 2 people from each group to be willing to come into the room together, even though people had been neighbors for hundreds and hundreds of years. And when people came into the room, it was about establishing that kind of relationship. The Acadians came in first, came in last, and they apologized for being late, and then apologized that their English wasn't that good. And then the Mi'kmaq from Bear River said, well, you at least still have your language. And then the African Nova Scotian said, you at least know what your language is. And so it took it to a very human place of the impacts that colonialization has had for so many people. And I think that's part of it. It's connecting the head and the heart and coming from both those places. And that's how you build relationships. If you're just coming from your mind and you're listening from your mind, you're not going to get the nuances. You're not going to get the layers that I think Albert was talking about. And in that project, it became very dramatic. I won't have time to explain the whole project, but I'll just say one piece that came. We asked each people in that room to invite 20. And so all these communities came together. They met in Bear River. The vast majority had never been to Bear River before. And they held a talking circle. And they talked about what the first round was, to think about your grandparents and what life was like for them. And then to think about the next round was what you want for your children. And so a real common ground from the heart was created that built those relationships, which then meant when the Marshall decision upheld the Mi'kmaq's right to fish, you had Acadian fishermen going out and providing protection for the fishermen from Bear River. And you had everyone agreeing on how to do this and kicking out any kind of government people so that the decision was community-based. And that was true collaboration. It was not easy. It was not easy at all. And it required everybody to be authentic, to come from the heart, and to really listen to each other. And I think part of the difficulty, if you've only been raised in a Western world, is how to listen with your heart. I remember somebody from Scotland coming who does community development, and I took him to a meeting in Membertou in a teepee where we were discussing a Native youth gathering that we were going to be holding. And afterwards he said, that was a nice meeting-ish, but you didn't make any decisions. And I was like, what? And went back to the hotel room and typed up 17 decisions that we had made. But because things ask a question, you get an answer, he couldn't hear. And so it really is a different way of thinking and learning how to really hear with the heart. So if someone's sharing a story, thinking about, what does this story hold for me? What do I need to learn from this? So I'm now being asked to pass the floor. And sorry, Steve, you didn't get much of a chance to talk there. Is there something you want to say before we wrap up? No? All good? Okay. So I'm going to pass the floor to Christine and to Heather. And Walalan Tapalat.
Anin Kenagwea. Hello, everybody. My name is Wasiasin Christine C. I'm Ojibwe from Lac Seul First Nation, which is in northwestern Ontario, and Boatin, Sault Ste. Marie. I was born in Sault Ste. Marie at the mouth of Lake Superior, but raised north of there. And I am coming to you from the Lekwungen territory at UVic in Victoria, BC. Here, I'm in my office right now at UVic in the Gender Studies Department. And I'm going to pass it over to Heather to introduce herself.
So thank you, and miigwech. So I'm Heather Schmidt. I'm a psychology professor in, at Cape Breton University. Sorry, I'm rehearsing in my head too long what I was going to say. So I've sort of migrated the opposite way of Christine across the country. So I'm a settler. I was born and raised in a suburb of Vancouver on Coast Salish territory. So Lee Maracle's poem at the beginning kind of made me homesick for orcas and the ferry and things like that. Cedar. Then I went to graduate school in Toronto. I got a job for a few years at Algoma University in Sault Ste. Marie, Bawating, which is where I worked with Christine. And since then, I've been at Cape Breton University. So I guess we're here to talk about a project that we worked on together and ideas about allyship and reconciliation and friendship. We're friends, so.
We're friends. We're such good friends. We actually didn't even come up with a strategy for how we're going to approach this, but it flowed so well on Monday when we had when we got to meet everybody, that we thought we would just wing it again. But I guess, Heather, I'll just share a little bit about how we come together. Yeah, so we met in Boatin, Sault Ste. Marie at the mouth of Lake Superior at Algoma University, but more specifically at a research institute. I was just wrapping up my master's in Indigenous Studies and Canadian Studies, and Heather was completing her PhD in psychology, and we were working with the wonderful Gail Broad, who was the director of that institute, and Gail is a settler. And so the project, though, and I was thinking about this, Heather, all the circles in terms of how our work came to be, and it really was, we can start with the relationships that Gail had with local Anishinaabe in terms of her work, and Anishinaabe woman Rosalind Johnston, who was the director of a Anishinaabe child welfare, child and family organization, wanted some research, some community-based research done, so went to Gail and asked her if she could help out, and proposals were done and all that. And then, Heather and I became part of this research team, and on asking several Anishinaabe First Nations about questions around the existing kind of colonial child welfare system, and how did those communities see the future? Did they want kind of some autonomy in that, some independence? And we were really privileged to be able to come up with kind of a research framework, so to speak, about how to do that. And I think one of our first meetings, Heather, was just coming up with this framework. And one of the things that I really think about is how I was just so grateful for your expertise, your knowledge, your confidence in kind of social sciences, qualitative research methodology. But I think also kind of what I brought as Anishinaabe, even though I was a graduate student, I had a history in counseling. So I had this idea of, Anishinaabe theory or our culture and ways that we might be able to frame it that might be really kind of engaging when we went to talk with people in community. So I really like that, the ways those two different kinds of approaches came together and how we were able to do that.
Yeah, I also felt like we had sort of a good dynamic, like we sort of complemented each other, and like it was a really difficult subject. We were attempting to get people to talk about, child protective services, given the history of the 60s scoop and how it's continuing to be a problem today with children's aid and stuff like that. So it was a really sort of heavy topic. But we managed, I think half of our work was just consulting with the 7 different First Nations and visiting the elders and visiting the leadership and visiting and visiting and visiting and getting to know people and bouncing ideas off of each other, and sort of working with them to develop something. Also, I don't know, I always kind of remember that we used to inject some humor into things just because, I look like a ghost here, so I'm very bright. But yeah, like we didn't necessarily play to their expectations all the time, because you had way more knowledge than me about social work. You'd completed your master's degree, so you knew all the right words with like indigenization and settler and stuff, whereas I did not get that in my psych training. Instead, I'd been affiliated with a project that was run by an Indigenous steering committee. So they had pretty much taught me, like, don't use those fancy academic words. So I remember I would use words like the white man and stuff like that. And sometimes like people would sort of, snort into their, be like, yeah, I didn't think you were gonna say that, but it's sort of an interesting dynamic that if you can sort of inject a little, humor and lightness into an otherwise difficult topic, then sometimes it makes the process a lot easier, and you don't necessarily, I think that was one of our concerns, was we didn't want people to just get stuck in their trauma and we would just be like, bye, we'll see you later. So we wanted to leave them feeling positive and good and hopeful about the future, and like they had a say in shaping, you know, the future of child protective services. So yeah, it seems like, anyways, a good process.
Yeah, it was kind of serendipitous when you talk about that kind of our dynamic. I mean, it was really a relationship of circumstance. We didn't have a pre-existing relationship at all. I mean,
No.
And so it was a relationship of circumstance. So I think somebody was looking out for us, Creator was looking out for us or something, because it really did work well. And I, when I say that, I mean the whole thing, like with Gail's relationship with Rosalind, with the elders, with, you know, people really trusted us as strangers, even though I was Anishinaabe and kind of have an insider in that way. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean things are easier. It just means certain different things happen, and different kinds of ethics and different kinds of relational protocols are embarked upon. But I think you and I together, and, you know, with you, with your, you know, being able to say things like, you know, the white man. So I think, you know, that really worked well. And then, but what I really loved about that is, even though it was a kind of a discrete moment in history, I mean, I still have these other memories too around, it's kind of like it merged into this, you know, that was 10 years ago, so we're still friends. It's quite possible we will work together on such projects in the future. I mean, who knows what the future holds, but we're still friends. And, you know, I think that's kind of a beautiful thing about that. And we can talk about this project. And, but I also remember, you know, really sharing some really kind of important things together. Like, there was the moment, like we were driving on the highway, we did a lot of driving together, a lot of processing of things together, of checking in with each other. So we were allowed to debrief in that way in the privacy of the car or the hotel room. But, you know, the whole, when I think about when Prime Minister Harper gave the apology, you know, we were rushing to try to get into the car and be driving home so that we could be listening in, you know, get satellite connection or somewhere in Northern Ontario to this radio. And I just remember that as being, you know, that's going to be always a memory for me. Who was I with at that moment, you know, and it was a good moment for me as Anishinaabe. It was a hard moment, but I think, you know, you also have your memories of that as well. And there was the days after leading up to, I mean, after it as well. But, and then I think about the sugar bush. We did some work in the sugar bush. So you roll in your eyes.
Yes.
So the relationship wasn't just about the work, right? But it's been a bit about having fun with each other as well, but also other poignant moments as well.
Yeah, like I know sometimes when I'm sort of thinking about like how how to be a good ally and to help with reconciliation and to be proactive, like sometimes I do kind of really struggle with like, I don't know, I don't want to take the place or the opportunity that should go to an Indigenous person. So yeah, it's sometimes sort of an uncomfortable sort of what's appropriate, what's not. Sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I feel like the world's really messed up and I'm just, you know, sort of trying to find, you know, make the best of it sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know. But I think like with this project, at least, I periodically had these senses that I was in the right place at the right time with the right people, and it was coming together. And at the end of the project, when one of the elders, we were presenting the results, and she was one of the tough little Anishinaabe grandmothers, and she was saying something like, I really heard the voices of the people in your results. And it was like, oh, thank God, that's what you want. You want to clearly communicate as a researcher what your participants told you and honor that, and you know, yeah, reflected in an accurate and a way. So yeah, I mean, I'm still sort of struggling as an academic sometimes, you know, what's appropriate for me, what's not, sort of thing. But yeah, and occasionally I just have these little flashes, like today was a good day, or Yeah, so yeah, I also remember driving down the road, listening to Prime Minister Harper and the apology, and I really don't remember anything he said, but I remember the drums and the drums, and the drums are the heartbeat, and I was really grateful I was not driving because I'm a crier, so it's not good to be driving and wiping all the tears and the snot out of your face. So yeah. So yeah, that's also kind of burned into my memory, but also just that I felt like I was in the right place at the right time, with Christine, with Gail, with Roz, with others, and we were doing good work. Like our hearts were in the right place, and we were all working together, even though it wasn't easy to do good work for Nogda Windham, an Anishinaabe organization. So
yeah, and I think to go back to what Ismael said, I to think about we have our own work to do, and that's not just for settlers or non-Indigenous people. I think as Indigenous people, I think about where the state I was in at that time, it's just, and I feel like maybe I'm still that way. Everything has to be about decolonization, and I'm kind of intense about it. But you were just very, patient and slow and easy and gentle. And I think that was really, really good for community. And I always had this kind of political bent in the writing, and kind of there was just back and forth. I know Gail would go over the writing and just say, well, maybe, maybe not this, we don't have to go this far with this thinking, or, not necessarily that I agree with that, but there is that process of back and forth. And I think we had a lot of time to do that. I think we actually started out that way, where we just carved out space to really just be in conversation with each other about our ideas. What did we think? We listened to each other. And I personally don't ever, and not to say that everything has to be romantic, because I think it's important in these relationships to talk about the struggles, where relationships may fall away, or for good, ideally not, but where maybe relationships, allyships need breathing room. I don't think we ever had that, but let me see. So we have a few seconds left. So I just want to wrap it up and just say thank you to everybody who came before us. Really, really wonderful to hear your stories and experiences and all your brilliance. Miigwech.
Oh, yes. Walalan and miigwech, and thank you. Oh, and our next speaker then is Carola Knockwood.
Good evening, Nidilawasi Carola. My name is Carola. I guess before I say anything, I really would like to take this moment and, acknowledge, Elder Albert Marshall, and, the work that has, and to acknowledge the work that has come out of Edawaptam and Gantuwide Seeing. And, I remember being a student at CBU and having the opportunity to be part of a summer project where, I sat there and I listened to elders and, recorded their stories. And, what more can somebody ask for, right, as a summer job, to be able to do that? At the same time, like, to be able to learn from, elders like Albert Marshall, Medina Marshall, and, many more that I can just picture right now, but I can't think of their names. Anyway, so I guess for me, how I approach this is I kind of presented what this could look like in practice. And so, and I guess I better stop and introduce talk a little bit more about my work. I'm originally from Siganiktuk territory. I live here now in Unmagig. I've had the opportunity, the privilege to be a teacher. I was in grade primary and in grade 2. and then moved on to a position with Mi'kmaq Madinoi, where I was the literacy consultant. But my passion was around Edawaptamimk and bringing our knowledge and our knowledge system into science and also into our curriculum. And so, that work began at MK and working there. Currently now working at Mi'kmaq Services Branch. And so what I'm going to talk about today is, the work that we've done and really what it looks like in practice. And certainly, before even deciding on a way to move forward, Edawaptamimk, to wide seeing, is something that guided our work from the start. And growing that Mi'kmaq eye. So the story that I'll share with you today is around reconciliation and inclusion. And it's my story and my experience. So treaty education is a work that I've been part of and engaged in at Mi'kmaq Services Branch, with my team and with educators and regions all over Nova Scotia. And that work really speaks to reconciliation in action. I heard Albert and Nadine talk about huge initiative and small steps. And I think that, what I'm about to talk about is exactly that. I know when I started my position there, one of the things I knew is to understand where people are at. And so take a moment to listen and to watch and to get an understanding of where people are at. And one of the things that I made a connection to right away was, we need to grow those foundational understandings, those essential understandings as we move forward with treaty education. And those essential understandings are Mi'kmaq ways of being and knowing, Edawaptamimk as a guiding principle to help us along through the work that we're doing, Nidigulimp guided pedagogy, Ilawaptamog. So I'm going to come back around and talk about some of the things around Mi'kmaq ways of being and knowing and the teachings there. And pull out some important aspects. So Mi'kmaq ways of being and knowing, what, the important teaching there is, we have 4 aspects to being. And those 4 aspects are emotional, physical, cognitional, and spiritual. And so along with those 4 aspects of being is this concept of whole child. And it speaks to a holistic approach that's anchored in those 4 aspects. So if we talk about education, then it's about learning and growing the understanding of these teachings, of teaching and learning in a holistic way. There's this idea of balance, and to be in balance, you have to work these 4 aspects: the spiritual, the cognitional, physical, and emotional. And the third point is, this 4 aspects and this understanding and holistic approach. And this balance helps people understand that Mi'kmaq understanding of well-being. One of the other things that we talked a lot about in Mi'kmaq ways of being and knowing is teaching, is that teaching that we are all born with gifts and talents. And our responsibility as adults is to ensure that we nurture these gifts and these talents. And one final note is, before I move on to the next part, is, this was shared with us through an elder, Jane Meader. And, it's something that she wrote for us, Mi'kmaq Ways of Being and Knowing, to help, guide and to teach all of us as we move forward in growing these essential understandings. The next one is Edawaptamink, and Edawaptamink as a guiding principle. And I want to talk about it in relation to treaty education. That's the example that I'm going through. But learning to see, to respect, and acknowledge that there are two ways of being, knowing, and doing. And that is the Mi'kmaq and Indigenous way of knowing and being, and the mainstream and Western ways of being and knowing. So Edawaptamink is about a Mi'kmaq knowledge system and a mainstream knowledge system. And it's about working with both. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I would like everyone just to pause for a moment and to close your eyes. And I want everyone to imagine a blue ribbon, and a blue ribbon that's floating around you. Maybe it's slowly moving into your vision, and it's swaying back and forth. And another ribbon begins to emerge, a green ribbon, and it's animating itself into your vision. And slowly, these two ribbons begin to dance together. Sometimes moving rhythmically, other times they are in unison. Now, imagine that these ribbons are side by side. They are intertwined, still dancing around each other. One ribbon moves in front. The other ribbon twirls around the other one. Occasionally, both of these ribbons overlap. Maybe we can even imagine that one ribbon is leading the way while the other ribbon follows, while gently moving back and forth. Let's open our eyes. These ribbons represent the two knowledge systems, that Mi'kmaq knowledge system and that mainstream knowledge system. Let's think back to the imagery that you saw in your mind. Pay attention to the ribbons, like they were distinct. Those ribbons were independent. And each ribbon had the potential to enrich the other. And that's how I see how we work with both knowledge systems. When we begin to learn and respect, acknowledge and see, from that Mi'kmaq eye and from this perspective and this worldview, then we become practitioners of Edawaptamink. So treaty education is giving Ginu and us that opportunity to grow the Mi'kmaq eye and bring Mi'kmaq knowledge system into the work that we do. Edawaptamink, has been our guiding principle that's leading to this inclusive work. And, in this work, one of the things that I've always reminded, I shouldn't say remind, one of the things that I've reminded myself is, shared this teaching, and it's a teaching that comes from Albert Marshall about ensuring that, the work that you do, is it authentic, is it accurate, and is it sacred? And so, I truly hope that the work that we've started to do around treaty education in Nova Scotia is true to the original intentions, that Edawaptamink is a guiding principle that speaks to the person's spirit, heart, and mind. And that's a direct quote from Albert. And we've heard today, Edawaptamik requires a journey of co-learning and collaboration. Another key component is growing those essential understanding is Nedigalin guided pedagogy. And I'm going to read something that I wrote a couple of years ago. And as I was starting to develop my own understanding, growing my own understanding around Nedigalin. Nedigalin begins when a person learns to weave respect, responsibility, relationship, and reciprocity into every aspect of his or her life. Everything they do to Utsitkamo and on Utsitkamo. It is more than a mental concept because it is a profound way of being and knowing that guides one's understanding of how to live within Utsitkamo and how to live in harmony. So when an individual, a community, or a society weaves this way of knowing and being such that it guides our actions, then people begin to live and act according to Nedigalin. In its most simplest description of Nedigalin, there are 4 aspects, and that's relationship, responsibility, respect, and reciprocity. There are also interactions of interconnectedness, and that's me, or myself, family, community, and environment. And understanding how these 4 interact and interconnect with the 4 values is part of growing that understanding. And it's the work that we've embarked on this year. And also understanding that, this is the first layer of understanding that, that we're growing. Small steps. And now I'm going to come back to this phase called Ilawaptamog. And so now coming back to the work that we've done around treaty education, around, Mi'kmaq ways of being and knowing, our understanding of Edawaptamink as a guiding principle, and our understanding of Nedigalin guided pedagogy. So now we come back to, what have we done? What have we learned? And where are we now? And in answering those questions, it will guide us to identify what we need to do next. So in this process, and these questions help guide our actions. So these are the key areas that will continue. So as we work in these key areas, it will help us as we move through this cycle and continue to grow our understandings is to stop and pause and ilawaptaman dango egizi dango egjido at dango egedon. So to continue to grow our essential understandings and actions towards inclusion. So this is very briefly describing, the work that we've done in the province with the primary to 2 teachers. And it's certainly, something that, we will continue to work on, and that each of us as individuals continue to grow those essential understandings so that, we will be, the advocates, we will be the teachers that we need to be so that our kids are successful.
Thank you, Carola. That's really wonderful. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I just want to end with one that's just 3 words. You're welcome, though. And so returning back to Edawaptamink as a guiding principle to move your work forward. And I keep coming back to this, and it's worth saying it again. Is the work I do authentic? Is it accurate? And is it sacred? So, Walalia. And I guess I'd like to welcome everyone back on screen and ask the two Lees to come and take over.
Thank you, Carola. That has been a whirlwind tour of some amazing work. I'm happy to say that most of you folks are friends, and Carola, we're just meeting. We were trembling after Lee read her poem, and we got ahead of ourselves, and I'm really sorry we didn't do proper introductions. So I would like to invite our commentators on screen, if that's possible. And I'll start with introducing Lee Maracle, and that just never gets old for me, Lee. I love saying that. I'm introducing Lee Maracle. Anyway, I am so pleased the poem that you just picked at the last minute was so powerful. I keep that I'm home mama just. So it's my honor to introduce you, Lee. You don't really need an introduction, and I think a lot of people have joined tonight to see and hear you. I read somewhere today, and I know that in your culture you don't use the word elder, and you're a wise woman. And what I would say is I was reading that when an elder dies, a library burns down. And I'm just so grateful to have you and Albert here tonight. We're so blessed. But Lee is a trailblazer in other ways. She's been writing and teaching, and she's run awards. She's bravely spoken her truth in her writing, her activism, and how she lives, and the way she read to us tonight. She's a teacher at U of T and a guest lecturer at universities all across the country. She's won numerous literary awards. She's written over 10 books. She's had a Doctor of Letters from St. Thomas University, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, Officer of the Order of Canada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll let you introduce yourself, Lee. I just wanted to make sure people knew all those accolades first.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure why people leave out Waterloo University, but they gave me a honorary doctorate too. So if you mention the one, you sort of got to mention the other. Otherwise,
Fair.
just say, I have a couple of those. But in any case, thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm Slava Stalo, and I'm part of the Salish Confederacy. And the thing that I know about us is that words are sacred, they have power, they have impact. That's how we say words in our language. That's what it translates into. And so we have to take care, especially when we're speaking English. I look up every word I use in English before I speak. And I heard allyship over and over again this evening. And I have to say, the meaning of that word, it's still, you know, on the internet, if you want to have a look at it, means the in-group, inviting the oppressed and the marginalized from the out-group to be a part of them. And that strikes me because someone laughed, I think it was Heather, laughed at herself for using the word white man. But let me tell you that for every dollar the white man earns, Indigenous women who are equally educated make 55 cents. And white women who are equally educated make 54 cents. I'm sorry, but Harper got rid of the penny, so that doesn't mean anything anymore. But we do make a penny more than white women who are equally educated. And women of color, Asians and African Canadians, make 48 cents. So we're still pegged against the white man. That's still the problem here. And they're also the guys that jump up to redefine what's happening and what we're doing here. And allyship was what they came up with. That's how they maintain their position, because they are the in group and we're the out group. And I remember sitting on a panel with someone who called me marginalized. And I said, from what? I am a Siam in my nation. I am not oppressed. I have moved up in my nation from a youth to a Siam. I am a knowledge keeper. I am a speaker. I am someone that is consulted by almost everyone before they do something, because I have accumulated the knowledge, the highest position in my nation that you can accumulate. I am not oppressed. Oppressed means can't move up. But I'm not trying to move up in the white man's world. And I think Carola said that very, very plainly to us all. The idea is, for me, that you as settlers have to find a way to be included in our world, because it is our land that is colonized. It is our land that has the stories. It is our land that has the keys. I think that's been said over and over again. It has the knowledge, and it has the way of being that will resolve the problems of the world. If we keep talking about allyship as being included in the white man's way and the white man's world, then the earth itself is being colonized. I think we should remember that it is the earth that is they're boring holes into and dragging parts of her out. And it is the earth that's being exploited. And the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was the idea of commercialization, because there was some struggle with that. I really loved watching the struggle that Tuma and I can't remember the other, Steve, I think it was, had trying to figure out what all that was. And I think what the woman ended up saying was it's about sharing. And that Indigenous people are about sharing. We're not about giving up what is ours. We're about sharing it. But the first recognition is that this is our continent. It still is. There's no getting around that. There's no getting around that colonization is England coming and taking a continent by force and by murder and by rape and by bloodshed, and it still, by force of arms, maintains dominion over the continent. So that's what we're talking about here. So when we talk about reconciliation, we mean us becoming friends based on recognizing what the elephant in the room really is and who it is, and saying, okay, we need to move beyond that. So we have to change the way we say things. And I really appreciate all the Indigenous language that came out in this conversation, because it seems to me that if we say it in our language, then we don't have words like exclude. I cannot exclude anybody out there. I can isolate that one person is doing better than another. I can say that when I talk about reciprocity and talk about sharing, but I cannot exclude anyone in my language. So that means something to all of us, I think, all the Indigenous people that spoke. When the English won't do, use the language. So that means that Europeans have to ask, well, what is it that we're trying to do here? And peace and friendship is what the first elder came up with. And peace and friendship was what the second woman came up with, and peace and so on and so forth. All the Indigenous people talked about peace, friendship, and harmony. And they talked about responsibility. They talked about reciprocity. They talked about relationship. And what's the other fourth thing? They talked about respect. So those four things, if we have those four things, then we have a relationship together and we can reconcile with each other. But if we're going to use European terms that are dominant over us and include us in some exploitative society that is dominating the earth, then we cannot have a relationship. We cannot. We will figure that out as time goes by, but all the relationships that we have with Europeans and other people of color and Africans that work have as foundations the heart, the mind, the body, and the soul, and the sharing arrangement, and the connection to the earth, the waters, and the skies, and the respect that goes on between all those beings. And that's clear from the Indigenous people that spoke. It gets a little muddied when we start talking about allyship. The other thing I don't like about the term ally is that it's a military term.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we're at war. And that's just my feeling about all this. I don't think we ever wanted to be at war. I'm the descendant of the Princess of Peace in my territory. We ended war with her. And so we have been very clear about that. We're not fighting anybody. We're not going to war. We are not going to war. So I don't have allies then. I have friends, I have peace, I have relations, and I have respect for others. And I have sharing arrangements with everyone I know. That's my friend. And I thank you for letting me share my thoughts with you.
Oh, taho. Oh, thank you again. I'm also now going to introduce our other commentator, Leigh Potvin. Dr. Leigh Potvin is an assistant professor at Cape Breton University in the sport and physical activity leadership at the Department of Experiential and Community Studies. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and African Studies from McGill University. She has a Bachelor of Education and a Master's of Education and a PhD in Sociocultural and Political Contexts of Education from Lakehead University, with a focus on gender equity and LGBTQ advocacy.
Yeah.
And I'll let Leigh introduce the rest. How's that, Leigh?
Okay.
Thank you. I always am very happy to come second after Lee Maracle. And Leigh, you've been so gracious to share your thoughts in the behind the scenes sessions and online. And I have pretty much worshipped you since I was 20 years old. So this is a big academic coming of age moment for me. And it's interesting to end tonight. Oh, I have to say some things about myself. Okay, so sorry, I'm a settler, and I'm originally from Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is on the traditional territory of the Fort William First Nation, the Anishinaabe people. And I have been living in Cape Breton for 4 years, and I've been really grateful for my time in Unama'ki to learn more about two-eyed seeing and to learn more about Albert Marshall's teachings that we heard about tonight from so many people. I am a mom and a partner and an aunt, and I think a friend to many. And interestingly, to finish tonight this series with this concept of allyship, which I actually spent my doctoral dissertation studying. So I wish all of you were in my life 10 years ago. And I was so compelled tonight to hear the ways in which we can honor these respectful relationships that people have, but also, you know, we have these tendrils of sort of problematizing the privilege that settler people have, which Leigh has so aptly shone the light on for me, and I think for all of us. And some of the things that really stood out to me was this idea, and Duma, you can correct me if I'm sort of misrepresenting what you said, but the notion that the treaties, you know, provide this template of how to relate and to be in good relations with one another. And then the idea that, you know, this notion of allyship is sort of failing or failed or faltering or flawed. And we're also, the settler governments and people, they're not honoring these treaties. And so there's these like this broken concept that's coming from something that is being dishonored. And maybe that's something everyone else thinks about all the time, but I had not. And so I'll be chewing on that for quite some time. And so I'm really grateful for that, Duma. And to Heather, who, you know, I consider a friend, we've talked about this discomfort that comes with, you know, trying to hold space and work as an ally or a friend and work with people. And I felt a lot of that discomfort actually in this process, if I'm allowed to be a little bit meta here for a moment, because I definitely had moments where I thought, you know, and I think I said out loud, like, am I the person you want to do this? Are you sure you don't want someone with better credentials to be working alongside Lee Maracle for 3 sessions? Anyway, so I think that I've had a real journey through this whole process as well, and just have really enjoyed so much everything that people have talked about. And I suppose this idea that Carola raised, you know, that's embedded into what I'm seeing about being authentic and being accurate and being sacred in everything that we do, and how hard it is to achieve that, or not how hard it is, it's actually quite easy, but how our lives can pull us in so many different directions. You know, being a tenure track professor, there's pressure, and, you know, you don't always have the time, and so I guess I just feel really so grateful for everything that everyone has shared. And I pretty much say that every time. So anyone who's attended all 3 sessions is like probably thinking this person has no new content. But I just think that if we are going to, you know, live and work in appropriate relation with one another, then those of us settler folks, we really need to consider how we enter into those relationships and think about more what we have to learn and less what we have to teach. And I think that that's something that's really important to me, and it was important to me as a teacher working with young people, and it continues to be important, which is, you know, what am I going to learn? What am I going to learn alongside the people that I have in my life? So yeah, and everyone's back now. Everyone's on screen. It's nice to see everybody.
I can see everybody.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, those are my thoughts, I think. Yeah, maybe more. But thank you, everyone, so much. Miigwech.
Thank you.
And Catalina, I know you're in the background. Have you had any questions, or can we just offer questions amongst ourselves?
Thank you. So everybody has answered all the questions through the Q&A, but we do have a very special message from Suzanne Hawk to Lee Maracle, actually, and she wrote, "Thanks. Still appreciate the time you took to respond to my emails back in 2019 about my project, the 2 Row Flow Cultural Commons. Honored for your time, wise woman and descendant of the Princess of Peace." She also went further to share that she has launched, they have launched their network and is inviting everybody who wants to join, so that can be found in the chat. All other comments are welcome through the chat, and I leave the space to wonderful people to continue the conversation.
Let's go.
I just, Lee, one thing that you just said about thinking about what we have to learn more than what we have to teach. I remember early days when Carola and I were working, when she was studying and I was working with the Institute of Integrative Science and Health, and we had all these meetings with these phenomenal elders, some of whom she mentioned, lots of work with Jane and with Lillian Marshall and Dr. Granny and Caroline Gould, like all of these elders, many of whom we've lost, not all, but many. And these meetings, somebody was talking about, Ismael, you were talking about all these decisions being made and like needing to get things done. Like these are working meetings, and they would start with an opening prayer. And I remember when I started this work feeling so uncomfortable about an opening prayer, really not, and they're always in Mi'kmaq too, so not understanding them, not feeling, you know, just lots of discomfort. And it was through opening prayers, you know, Albert or maybe Charlie Joe Dennis doing these opening prayers, that I started to hear the language. So I remember hearing all of these variants of Walalin, Walaliok, like all of these words of gratitude for different things. And I remember the moment where I thought, oh, they're thanking everything. And that was a huge lesson for me, that really a culture is about gratitude and feeling that that gratitude for their relationships. And I've really, like, that is a huge lesson for me, an ongoing lesson. and a huge lesson for me to pass on to my children and to our community. I just think like that was a huge moment of learning, of understanding, and then that continues. So just thinking about all of the things that I had to learn.
Right.
I think one thing that oh, Carol, sorry, go ahead.
All I was going to say, maybe a word that things will begin to grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We planted seeds.
Planting seeds, growing.
I think I appreciated all other folks that spoke tonight about the challenges in their relationships too, and just that framing that if we're building relationships and it is a relationship, then it's not, you know, it's not all going to be happy, easy conversations, you know. And I think that that's something when settler people especially want to talk about allyship, they want to talk about like that big important moment where they felt good about themselves. And if that's what that's not authentic. And that's not the right that's not the right motivation, right? Like you shouldn't, I think if you don't feel uncomfortable at some point, if you're a person who has some social privilege, then you're really not doing the work. And you know, if it just feels really happy to you, then you're probably like, people are not telling you what you're doing wrong. So
I think it is a lot about discomfort, and also finding friends who will remind you that of the things that you have done right and encourage you to keep going in that. So I think that is one thing that I think our friendship has, one reason why it's meant a lot to me is because Albert will say, hey, that really works, or oh, when you said that, I saw how people responded, or hey, that's a good idea. Even just that is like, and working with people who may take note, and not that I need constant pats on the back. I don't think that's what this is about. But in friendships, that's what we do, you know. In true collaboration, we're honoring and recognizing this moving forward, this co-learning together. So, and I feel like being here with all of you and all of the participants is like an amazing little pat on the back, and it's lovely to be here.
Can I just interject something? I think if you need a pat on the back, or you want a pat on the back, then you probably need it. No one needs to do that for me. I'm pretty sure since I was about 4 years old that I was on a path that I was going to gain something from, and I have. I'm not sure what this means to relationship. I'm a relationship builder. I'm a builder. I come from the Salish people, and we build huge long houses, and we pack everybody in there. And so my job in that is to know who those people are. So I probably know about 5,000 Salish people. And I know their names, I know their families, I know who they are, where they're from. And this is a source of really huge joy for me. It's not part of the work. It's part of being a stalo, that we should know one another. So coming to know each other is what this is all about. And I think when I said words are sacred, they have power, they have impact, means we should be really careful about words, full of care about the words that we choose. And so because this is English and it's not my original language, it's actually my third language. So, you know, I struggle with it. So I look up things, you know, why don't I like the sound of that? I'll say to myself, and I'll look it up and I'll see exactly why I don't like the sound of it. Because this language very often brings in hierarchy right away and privilege right away, not for us, but for itself. And so if you have that as part of your origins, you need to be exceptionally careful, because no one who comes from a privileged and hierarchical background can be happy. You just can't be happy. And when we have a relationship that's fair and equal and just and authentic, as Carola put it so beautifully, then we can be fulfilled, and that will help us to achieve happiness. Happiness takes a little bit more effort on our part than we believe, but it will come to us if we are careful. So I don't think we should shoot for comfort or discomfort. I just think that we should shoot for being sacred, as Carola also said. Is it sacred? You know, the words have power. They have impact. They have. They come from the sacred. They come from the land. They come to us so that we can come together. That's the most sacred thing I can think of. Now, if we have to take our boots off, that's what we have to do. And that might be uncomfortable for some people, but I don't think that's what we're shooting for. Just, we have to take our boots off. We have to put our weapons at the door. You know, we had that ceremony. Leave your weapons at the door, it's called. And some people that came from places where we had warred with them were a little bit nervous about that, but they did. They did, because that's what friendship requires, that we not bring our weapons into the room. So that's the other thing about not bringing in discomfort. We must be careful not to bring weapons in. Bring some clarity, bring the sacred, bring us our authenticity, bring our understanding, bring our best self into the room. So if everybody has that, then the discomfort is because you're just not used to it. It's just an aside.
Just a small aside.
Yeah, a little side. I'm never just uncomfortable when someone tells me, oh, Lee, you don't know everything. Yeah, I guess I don't.
And I just quickly jump in here and say, and I just quickly want to say, you know, the words, you know, is it authentic and accurate and sacred, come from our elder, Albert Marshall here. So,
yeah,
yes.
It's beautiful though.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
remembered it. I think it's important that you remembered it and reminded us. It's very beautiful. And thank you, Marshall, for thinking of it. I'm sure it came from his elders too.
So there's,
You know,
go ahead, Albert.
You know, the reason why we felt it was essential that we come up with some guiding principles as to how our language should be our priority, and not to allow English to keep dominating our perspectives and our expectations.
Right.
And as well, like all Aboriginal languages have been transmitted orally. So it's very susceptible then of being misinterpreted, misused, or even fabricated. So by putting in place these 3 guiding principles, and when the elders gather on a regular basis, like we do here in Wabanaki, Cape Breton, if there is something that is not properly represented, it will be corrected right there and then.
Yeah.
Because once it's committed to text, it'd be next to impossible to change or to correct it. So by using these three guiding principles, we can then, you know, rest assured that authenticity, accuracy, at least to the best of this era's ability, because languages do evolve just like everything else. But we're only concerned at this particular point in time. You know, and in the next 7 generations, you know, they can think about it when it gets to that era. But we're only responsible for this era here because, like everything else, our languages evolves because of natural world is constantly evolving, so it's not static. So anyway, this is the reason why it was essential that we come up with these guiding principles to ensure that the language will always be maintaining this sacred level.
Right.
Oh, that's
fun.
Oh,
And the other thing, I think, that it's important to notice that why most of our people are ashamed to speak our language. That's something that's very, very difficult to try to comprehend. But on one hand, I suppose I can see, because when people are oppressed and suppressed for a long period of time, subconsciously they're going to be continuously trying to appease, constantly trying to appease their oppressors, even though they're oppressing them. And I think this is where this shame comes into being, that we're still trying to make this statement to the oppressor. Look how much we have adapted. Look how much we have accepted your ways. We can even talk and think like you. And that is now being used against us, because English is now practically used to teach Mi'kmaq. Very, very.
And it is the white man that's the privileged one.
Oh, I don't, I'm aware of the time, and I don't really want the evening to end. And Lee started us with bringing us deep into our hearts about coming home, and Albert's left us with language. And I want to respect the time, and if anyone else has anything they'd like to add before we clue up and say goodnight. And we're going to close with Jeremy Dutcher and the honor song, When We're Ready. In that case, what I'll say is Walaliak to everyone tonight. It was a beautiful evening. Thank you for sharing and for hanging on. I know it's a big commitment to come in, and we didn't give you a lot of time to sort of share your really complex ideas. So thank you to all of you for being here tonight. And I'll let Terry say goodnight before we close.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone. I'm really humbled by all of the stories that you shared, and so thankful that you came to give us these teachings. This has been an amazing evening. And talk about discomfort. I was like, oh my God, if I had to kind of bring all this together, I don't even know how to do it. But I'm so glad that we had the last words from Albert. Thank you so much. And really some of the words that stick in my mind from Lee about I can't exclude anyone in my language. And that is just, that just hits home very strongly. And that it's not about sort of being included in our world, it's the other way around. So how do we turn this thing on its head? And we're starting that process through these conversations by acknowledging that's the truth. And how do we do that? And all of us are struggling with what that looks like. But the important thing is that we're trying and we're working together, and that we come in friendship. And so with that, we'll close. And I just wanted to say, for anyone who wants to pick up on some of the things that we've talked about tonight, tomorrow morning, the Northside Rising is having a conversation virtually, which Catalina is going to send the link to for anyone who wants to pick up on some of the things that were talked about tonight in more detail and ask any more questions. And we really would like feedback from people. So please tell us in the chat what you thought of the evening, or what you'd like to see us doing going forward. And thanks again to all our wonderful speakers and commentators. We so appreciate your time and energy and wisdom and friendship.
Right.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Dumas. Thank you, Matthias, Steve, Heather, Catalina, Carola, Christine, Ish, and Lee. Oh, the Lees. I introduced the
The
Lees.
Lees.
Oh.
We have two Lees. One's young.
Team Lee.
When you have a good smooth surface in the back.